Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to class today. Thank you for joining me, whether you're watching live or you're watching the recording. I appreciate you watching. So we're talking about GUIs, and we're wrapping up this semester, right? Like, this is basically the last big module that we're doing, and then the remainder of the semester is just time for you all to work on your final projects. I think next week we might have a really short live stream where I just talk some more about the final projects. Because in my opinion, like, the final project is sort of a simple concept to wrap your head around. It's basically do whatever you want as long as you meet a few certain set of qualifications. But I do think I probably should talk about it just a little bit more. Since we didn't get any questions sent in over the weekend or anything since last week, I just want to kind of do a little coding. I just want to code for a little while here. I'm just going to kind of quickly work through an example just of a Java program with a GUI in it. All right, just so we can have an understanding of kind of what we're doing. And really, one of the big things that we want to consider, right, is that essentially while we are working with, say, Java Swing, we're really working with a lot of different stuff, right? A lot of different objects, a lot of different items. And so really what I want to do is I want to really quickly do something that would be kind of an analog of what your project is for this module, which is a 4-function calculator. I want to do a 2-function calculator today. I also have another cool example that I do that I think we just don't have time for this time, which is a Magic 8 Ball. We'll do that. I may send that video out to you all just later in the week as another example. Or we could just skip it. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and create a new REPL. This is one of those things where we kind of need to use a REPL, and one of the things that we want to remember here is that we need to look for Java with Swing. Right, so if you try to use regular Java, which is the one that we get by default, this won't work because it doesn't have the Swing library in it. You want to make sure that you are using Java with Swing. I believe it tells you about that in the module as well. And so let's just work on building us a little 2-function calculator here. And by default, right, and I think I talked about this in the little preview video I did last week, or the little pre-recorded video that had all the information in it. You know, you get a lot of stuff here by default, and it's really just a singular window GUI. It just says hello world on it. One of the cool things about Replit when you're using Java Swing is it actually gives you this virtual machine that's running the program on here. So this is actually a machine, a virtual machine that this program is running on. And so you do have to stop and start every time, right, that you're doing this. And so what I'm going to do to get this kind of set up and going here is I'm going to remove this private function that they have here. Just get rid of it. I need, of course, the main method, so we'll use that. And I'm just going to kind of go through and do some coding here. Like, I already know what I'm building. And so one of the things that I talked about sort of last time is that I do like to build in, I like to build the GUI in its sort of own thing, right? So I might build something called, like, say, private void GUI, right? And that's going to be the GUI function that I use for this program, right? And for our GUI, we're just going to worry about a void function. We're not going to, do any kind of value functions. There are some other instances where we could do value functions. It's when we're doing calculations and things of that nature. right? But in this instance, I'm just making a little application. And so one of the things that I'm going to need, right, is I'm first going to need the frame, right? So I'm going to create a JFrame object here. JFrame F equals new JFrame. And that's something that you saw me sort of doing on the pre-recorded video last week as well, as I kind of use the letter of the type of item that I'm going to create. So if I'm going to create a frame, which is a window, I will use F. And if I create another window, I'll use, like, say, F2, F3, so on and so forth. And so inside of the constructor here, we're going to put the title. Of the program window, which is going to be called toFunctionCalculator. Now, if I want to access this, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go ahead and make some other object items in our frame here. We need to set the default close operation, which is f dot set default close operation. And this is going to be JFrame dot exit on close. Right, so whenever you close the application, it's going to terminate it, basically, is what's going to happen there. And then we're going to set a size, f dot set size. And we're just going to make this 640 by 480. Right, for the purposes of this course, there are ways that you can make it dynamically sized, but just to make it easy on us, we're just going to make a little static size here. So there are two other things that I would need to add here to the GUI to get the window to show up. One is f.set layout. And we're going to set that to null. And f.set visible. And we're going to set that to true. Right, so now all I need to do is I just call my GUI function here in main. Since this is a non-static function and I'm trying to call it in main, I would need to either create an object here or I would need to make this static. Right, if I created it static, then I could add private void and then I could just add GUI here in my main method, and that's going to run this function and output my window in my virtual. Right, there it is. And we see here it says toFunctionCalculator here, which is what I put in the JFrame constructor. And it has the ability to close the window and it exits out, right? We rerun the program. So that's the most basic thing to create the window. Now, there are some things that we would want to do that are going to be like necessary for the whole program. We'd want to implement those at class level. Everything else we can pretty much do inside of our GUI function here. We could also, if we wanted to, sort of pass it off to other things, right? Like if I wanted to create, say, another private void GUI function here, or another private void function here, and call it, say, set image. I can do certain things in it, like I can set an icon, right? And one of the things that I like to show you all how to do is add an image to your program. So if I wanted to do that, let's see here. I've got an image that I've used previously, right? It's just a little toFunctionCalculator image. What I can do here is I can drag this into the project by just dragging it right into that window. I want it to be in the same Java folder with main.java just to make life easy on me. So now you can see I have a 2fc.png here. And if I click that, it's a two function calculator little logo graphic with plus sign and equals. It's red and black. And I'm going to make this one static as well, so I can access it from inside from other static functions. I'm going to create an image icon. And this image icon, I'm going to give the name of I, and that's going to be a new image icon with the name of, or with the value of 2fc.png, which is what the file is. So then this will be JLabel. We'll give it a little JLabel logo, and we'll put this image icon inside of that JLabel, right? So this will be new JLabel I. Right? There's nothing preventing you from just doing this code here, right here. It's just going to make this a little bit cleaner if we do it into another function. Right, which is what I'm doing. Instead of just doing it all here in my GUI method, I'm taking the big parts out, putting them in their own function, just to kind of clean things up just a little bit, right? And so I can logo.set bounds. And so we set X location, Y location, width, and height. So it's 0 on the X location, 0 on the Y location, 640 on the width, and 140 on the height, right? Because that's the predefined size of the image. So it's going to be at 0, 0, X, and Y, which is going to be in the top left corner. Full width of the frame, regular height of the image. And then we can just add the logo to our frame. Right, so we could say something like f.add logo. Although, in this instance, right, since we've created this JFrame at this level, at our function level, this is not going to, this set image is not going to know about this constructor here. So what I'd probably want to do is I want to take this frame, move it out of here, and move it up to class level. I'm also going to make this static so I can reference it easily within other static functions. And so now I can refer to f.add logo here in set image. It's going to know what I'm talking about when I say f, because it's this one that's on class level. And we've talked about before how if we implement something at class level, it's going to implement it throughout the program, right? So I can access it from multiple methods. So now all that would require me to do is add the set image function right here inside of my GUI function. Right, I'm just going to call it from right inside of here, in between, and click run, just to see what it looks like. Oops, we got a little error here. It looks like I forgot to put a semicolon at the end there. Let's do that really quick. And now I get, ooh, not showing up there. Might be because we're using private functions here instead of public functions or default function. So let's change these into public functions just to see what happens. No, still doesn't like it. Well, for the sake of time here, so I don't have to troubleshoot, I'm just going to move it all into this GUI method. I'm sure there's some sort of permission that I'm forgetting here at the moment that I need to do. That I'm just forgetting, so I'm just going to move it all inside of GUI just to quicker. Or maybe it's something else that I'm forgetting here. adding it. What am I forgetting? It is in here. Did I import all of my libraries? Java AWT, Java Swing, Java Swing Border, and I shouldn't need event yet. What am I? Sure, it's something. Sure, I'm forgetting. I bet one of you out there right now is yelling at the screen because you see what I forgot. I am. Put that in the same file. It's right there. JLabel. JLabel logo. Logo.setBound. Any errors? For some reason it's not to import. What's going on? This should just be work. Hmm. I'm going to put this into another IDE that I have here just a moment, just so I can maybe see. See if I can see the error a little bit better. It might have something to do with the pathway of the way that the program, the way that they've changed replit. I don't think anything here in general is wrong. Hey, what? Let's make the next thing and let's see if it loads. And if it loads, I'll do it the same way as I did this. I'll add a little label 1 for a button. So let's add a static public void labels. And for the interest of time here, since we kind of took a little bit extra time there, I'm just going to copy and paste from my demo program, put it over here, and just talk about it. I do have a border set here. We will comment that out for the time being. When you use a border, you actually do need to make a border object. We are using the, I think it's using, yeah, we are using the border library here by default. So we can put a border object into here, which we may as well just do, right? Which is border, I called it black line, equals new border at new border factory. I want a border factory object here that create line border color dot what I believe. And it's not new border factory, it's border. It would help if I spelled border. There. So now I can uncomment this, call labels in here, and see if it works. So my label is definitely showing up there. So it's something with the pathing of this image, maybe. Maybe the fact that it is in source /main/Java. Try that. Hey, there it is. That's something that Replit didn't have to worry about before because it was all just in root before. So my notes would have it all in root. So that is that. All right, so I can talk really quickly about what this label kind of does. All right, and it's basically just putting this #1 label here. I can do the same thing for a label 2. So if I did a J label L2, I can kind of explain it as I go through. So this is going to be a new J label. And here we used HTML. I can use HTML again. Right, you can use HTML to kind of help you style some of your text if you wrap it all in the right tags. Notice here that I used uppercase for my HTML elements. That's something that's going to help it out. We're going to just drop that there and change 1 to 2 for number 2. We're going to set the bounding box of it. So L2.set bounds, and this is something I talked about a lot in the other video, right? When we're doing absolute positioning like we're doing here, this is something that you might play around with. I already have one that I know works, so I know that I can put this at 20 on the X location, 260 on the Y location, 85 width, and 20 height. Right, so you can see those last two are the same. The first one is the same. So they're on the same. Or actually, it's YX width height. Because we're moving this to the right some here. So they're both on the same Y location, but they are different places on the X. right? We can set a foreground color, we can set a background color. Since we set the color here in HTML, we don't have to set a foreground color. That would be the way that we would set the foreground color otherwise, right? I would do something like L2.set foreground. If I wanted to make this a color, and I'd do something like color white. If I didn't do it in my HTML, that's the way I would do that. But since I have done it in my HTML, all I need to do is set background, and we can do that with color red, which is what we're using here. Color.red, red is all uppercase. L2.set opaque is true. L2.set border is going to be that black line that we defined earlier. And then we can add this label as well to our project. So f.add L2. Right, and that's the thing really to remember about a lot of your GUI objects is that you need to create the object, you need to define its bounds, you need to define any colors you're going to define on it, and then you want to make sure that you add it to the frame. Right? Those are the things that you need to do with every single object every single time. Right, so if I stop and I run this now, and there's my number 2. And it is XY. So it is the same X location and a different Y location. I forgot what this looked like. I didn't look at it again before I started the, I thought it was XY, and it is. And so these are the labels. I put them in their own function here. Right, so I can kind of have this GUI a little bit cleaner. And, you'd be smart to do that as well. And there are some things that you want to do at the class level. Right, for example, if I was going to make, say, a text field. Right, like I would need to use that text field in a GUI function to set up the text field. But I would also need to set it up to be able to get the value from it in my action function. Right, so stuff like that. And I did a lot of these in the previous video, so I'm just going to kind of copy and paste these in for the interest of time here. Up here at class level, I have JTextField T1, JRadio button R1, JRadio button R2, JTextField T2, JLabel L3, and I'm going to make all of these static just to make them easier to deal with. You can not have them static. You'd have to refer to them in a bit of a different way. It just makes things easier for us if we refer to them in a static context versus a non-static context in terms of how we do things here, right? And these are all items that I would need something from this item in something else, or I would need something else. I would need to use this as a part of something else. Also, if I had, for example, some buttons here, we'll go ahead and add them in. My J buttons. I can add some buttons here. So if they need to be used in the GUI, and if they need to, say, control the event that is a part of the action, or they need to have some values taken from them, then you'd want to put them at the class level instead of inside of a function so that they can be accessed by multiple functions. And so in an effort to try to make this go a little bit more quickly, I think I'm going to copy and paste a little bit more code. Maybe sort of explain things as we go along here. For example, let's make another function with our interactive elements. So we'll make a static void interactive element. And these will basically be all those that we just did, right? So I want to take like a T1 and set bounds, RB1 and set bounds, RB2 and set bounds, so on and so forth, right? So I'm just going to copy and paste those into here. I'm going to set those bounds. I'm going to set those bounds. Like we added the text on them when we created the item at class level, right? If we go up here and look, we see, okay, here's T1. It's a new JText field. That's an empty text field box. Right, RB1 is our radio button. We gave it a label of +, and it has the value of true. We'll do RB2 here in just a second. All right, speaking of RB2, let's go ahead and throw that in here. All right, RB2 can go here. We would need our T2, for example. And one of the things that we need to do, though, if we are making buttons, radio buttons, so that they are all contained in the same group, I would need to make a button group here. So we'd probably want to add this as well. So I'd make a little button group element here. And I would take and put both of these into that button group. So I would g.add RB1 and g.add RB2. Right, and don't forget, we also haven't added any of these to the frame yet. So we will need to add these to the frame as well, right? Let's add the second text box here. We'll again do that with copy and paste, just so we can see it right. Like these values are all the same for set bounds, right? They're always X, Y, width, and height. Again, your mileage may vary in terms of what you put in for these values based on how big your window is, where you want to place elements, right? We're absolutely positioning elements here. So it's just going to be specifically where you put them. I've got some buttons here as well, but let's go ahead and do, say, f.add for all of these. So f.add P1, just so we can see them, and then we'll put our button element in. F.add T RB1, F.add RB2, F.add T2. Right, and just remember that that's typically what you're going to see when you're doing this. Is you're going to create the object, set the bounds of the object. If there are any other properties you need to set on the object, then you set those, and then you want to make sure you add it to the frame. Right, so now if I added this interactive elements function to my GUI, right, and we do interactive element, then when we stop and start here, there are all those interactive elements, right? We have these text fields where you can enter in text. We have the plus or minus, since we put them in a group. If we select one and the other one deselects, pretty cool. And so let's go ahead and add our equals button here. And that'll kind of be the extent of where we go with this, I think. Maybe everything kind of freezing up here for a minute. Add our equals button, so that's B underscore equals. I also have the code for a clear button in there. But I think, again, for sake of time, we won't do that here. And then I can f.add b equals here. Like one of the things that you can see, right, is that this takes a lot of time, but it's mostly just like little tedious things. Because it's all basically the same, right? If I stop and started this now, I think I did it a little quickly there. We have our equals button here. We could put a clear button here as well. In fact, let's just go ahead and do that, right? Like, if I don't style it, it's just going to take one line of code. You can see by default, like it has that nice little Windows XP styling to it. If you're a fan of old technology. f.add b underscore. And so that's basically all of our GUI elements for this. Like the other thing that we would need is another label that we would put on here. That would be the L3 label we put up here at the top, and we actually start out with that empty, because that's just the place where we put our answer. Right, so I could add that here as well, but it's just not going to be there yet. So I could do, say, like an L3.setBounds. Put some values in on that. I've already got these pre-baked, remember. You might need to do a little bit of trial and error to see what works for you. And add this as well. Now, one of the things you can do if you have a sort of placeholder like that, you can add a little bit of text to that placeholder button, or to that placeholder label, I should say, just so you can see it in context, just to see if it works. All right, so if we run that, we give it a second to pull up my screen here. We can see there it says 34 right there, and it's not very big. Right, so one of the things that I might want to do is make that a little bit bigger. So in this case, if I want to change the border or change the font size and make it bigger, I would use L3.setFont, the set font function. The first thing I would do is get the font. So I'd go L3.getFont. And then I'd say .derive font. And then put the new size in there. So I've already played with this and messed with it. So I know that 64F, right, a 64 point font basically is good here. So if I stopped that and run that, then I see I have a nice big answer down here at the bottom. Right, I don't want that nice big answer down there. I want it to be blank until I put something in. So I'm going to go back and take that placeholder text out. And so this is basically my GUI in a nutshell. Right, so what I want to do now is I would want to add stuff to make this work, to actually make this function. Right, and so I do need another library to import here at the top for that. I would want to import java.awt. t.event dot asterisk and import everything from the event library. And what we're going to do is we're going to import the action listener from that event library. So we're going to use this class that we have developed here as a part of our main method. And we are going to use this class to implement action listener. And that's going to implement the action listener class of the java.awt.event library. All right, so now we can create a function that does our thing. So in this instance, I am going to create a public void function. It's going to be called action performed. And we're going to give it an action event E. Now, one of the things that we see here is we see, okay, we got these two values. We need to take them and we need to parse them into integers or doubles or whatever we want to do with them, right? To make it easier on us here, we're going to parse them into integers. I'm going to create int num1. And I'm going to set that equal to integer.parse int t1.get text. So this will allow you to get the text from this. When the equals button is clicked, it'll get the text from this t1 text field. We'll do the same thing with int num2 equals integer dot parse int t2.get text. That'll get it from the other field. And then we will do string. We'll go ahead and put a string output here as a container that we will use later. We accidentally put a little space there. We don't need that space. Good. So now when the event happens, we want to know what we're clicking. So if the clear button is pushed, we want everything to basically reset, right? So if e.getSource, or if the source of the event is b_clear, what we want to do is we want to just take t1.set text and make it nothing. t2.set text and make it nothing. And L3, which is our output, right? The label output, .set text and make it nothing, right? So if the clear button is pressed, it just takes everything, clears it out. Else if, or really I could do an else here. I think an else would probably be more appropriate. I can do an else, right? So if the event source is anything but b clear, which would be b equals, we're going to nest a condition under here. And we're going to say if rb1 dot is selected. So we're going to look to see which of these two radio buttons is selected. If it's rb1, then we're going to do addition. If it's rb2, we're going to do subtraction. If rb1 is selected, we should take this and we should pass it to another function. All right, so in this case, we should probably be going to this point. We'll make a static int function called add numbers. We'll need an int in1 and an int in2. And we'll return in1 plus in2, right? Just to take the actual logic for the action out of this action event function. So in this instance, we would take output, right, which is that string that we created there on line 83, and set it equal to integer.toString, add numbers, num1 and num2. Right, because that's just going to take those numbers, return them back. Else, right, in this case, it would be, if anything else is that, we would output equals integer.toString, and then we'd want to do something else there, right? Like we'd want to do some subtraction, right? We could do it directly in here, right? We could do num1 minus num2. Again, in general, I don't necessarily like to do that just because it kind of takes and muddies up my code. For these purposes, however, we're going to do that here. It's going to be fine. And that's really everything that we need to do here, right? And I said this is going to be short today, and we flew through this, right? And even flying through this, it's taken us almost 50 minutes to do it. So really, like, we can do some testing here now and do some testing. We start this program back up. We'll give it a second to run. Right, one of the first things that I would want to do is I would want to just add some numbers in here and press clear. Just see if they reset, and they didn't because I didn't add the action listener to my buttons, which would be helpful if we did. So I'm going to go back here, b underscore equals, and this is back into my interactive elements thing here. I need to add an action listener to it so it knows that when it gets clicked, it's supposed to do something. b.equals.add action listener. We'll set that to this, right? Because that's going to mean that it is the action listener of this function. So it should be here. Actually, this is a static context. So I can't use this in a static context. So I think I can just leave that empty. Or do I? Because it's looking for, and it might just be E. That's the action event here, but what I might need to do is take these J buttons and make them non-static. Which means I would need to use an object here to access them in a static context. So I could just add an object here, main O equals new main. And then turn these into O dot O dot O dot O dot here as well. Oh, I put that object in the wrong function. So let's cut that out of there. Put it into here where it goes. All right, remember, we need an object to access non-static elements within a static context. So now that we've made those non-static, we need an object to be able to access them in a static. I'm going to add the action listener. Now I can reference this for that. And then O dot B underscore clear dot add action listener this as well. What do I want to do here? I might need to make this whole thing non-static for this to work, which will give that. Actually, what I would want to do here, I think instead, would be to set this to, instead of using this, set this to this dot. So we get rid of this, and we this dot this, right? This dot, this dot, this dot, this dot, this dot, and we this. Made this a non-static element. Then that's going to work, but then that non-static here in my GUI is not going to work. Now I need that main object here. Main O equals to main O dot interact about. And it looks like there's some sort of trouble with the virtual machine here. So let's copy it for a minute. Let's copy it to our clipboard for a minute so we can kind of refresh the window. Get it to force us something new here. Now we can A, B, try to run. And I think we've got everything now. Good. So if I do 45, 45, and I hit clear, it's going to clear them out. If I hit 12 and 12 and hit equals, oh, where's my answer? Oh, I've not set my, I need to set my text to output. Duh. Don't know what I'm thinking. So I would need to L3 dot set text output. L3 dot set text output. Now that's all right. We just forget a few things along the way. You know, it does get a bit confusing when you're doing all this stuff, and all this stuff is just sort of piddly simple stuff, right? Like it's just. So now if we do 12 and 12 and equals, we get 24. If we do minus and equals, we get 0. If we clear it out, we all clear it out. Right, so that's a two-function calculator that works. I said we were going to do this quickly and easily, and you saw me do a lot of things quickly by copying and pasting, and we still somehow took the full hour with a little bit of troubleshooting and different things put in here. So I am going to give you all access to this file when I upload the recording, just so you all have this. Let me go ahead and make sure that it's public so I can make sure that you all get it. But that's going to be all that I have for you for today. If you think of any questions while you're watching the recording, please send me an email or a Teams message and let me know. I think maybe tomorrow I will send you out another example of another GUI program. But that's all that I have for you for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.